let's be clear. The scientific method, in my view, is the greatest intellectual accomplishment of the human race since it emerged from its arboreal beginnings. It's an incredible thing. And the people that pursue science are doing extraordinary things. When you build a rocket to go to the moon, it can't be built on hunches, guesses, prayers, or anything other than the hardest of science, or it won't work. It won't even get 1 millimeter off the ground. And this is true about a lot of things we do. Okay, so what's the situation on science on this issue? Well, first of all, about 20 years ago, this is 20 years ago, a poll was done of just scientists on their view with respect to the phenomena. It's similar to many of the polls that have been done with the general public. 50% of the American people consistently poll this phenomenon as extraterrestrial. Okay. Well, a poll was done of just scientists, and guess what? 50% of the scientists polled said this is extraterrestrial. Okay. That's interesting. All scientists, they weren't just doing astronomers, all scientists, biologists, archaeologists, whatever. 50%. Okay, great. It gets more interesting. The best statistics that I have seen on the conservative side, and this is something I'm going to be talking about soon, and I'm about to publish something of interest. 2% of the American people are contactees, physical contactees. It's a big number, it's about 7 million, which means that 2% of the scientists are contactees. You just alluded to that. Okay, so we got 2% of the scientists are contactees, that's a big number, and you've got 50% believe it's extraterrestrial, so we must have a significant scientific engagement of the issue. Peer review papers, institutions, all of that. No, we don't have any of that. We have the odd scientist that has stepped out, right? We know some of them. John Mack was a scientist, psychiatrist. He stepped out. Harvard tried to sack him. Cost him $250,000. And a few others like that. But that's it. And all the scientists working at the universities who are teaching and doing a little research, how many fully accredited programs on the phenomenon exist in the 5,000 colleges and universities? 0. Okay. And so where's the research being done on the energy? Well, the research on the energy issue is primarily being done by non-college trained garage inventors, okay, who are very smart, with the odd, BS and physics, sprinkled in there, and they're cruising along, and again, the physics is there, right? And one of the reasons it's there is that people have been seeing these things flying around for the last 60 years, and it's just like you see the birds fly, you come up with an aerodynamic wing. You see an anti-gravity craft coming, you start looking for the reasons for that. That's what humans do. They're very good at it. And so you got all these inventors, and they all keep coming up with little things. Well, guess what happens there? This is the citizen science situation. They file for a patent. The patent gets eminent domain. They file for a patent. It's not accepted, right? Their lab gets closed down. They get closed down, right? All kinds of suppressions, all over the board, some of which get to the level of what they call executive action. So being an inventor in this, not easy. So you have a massive scientific suppression that covers the entire scientific community, college level. You've got, citizen scientists being, wow, in the name of what? Right, in the name of maintaining the truth embargo. And so when you corrupt science at that level, guess what? It spreads. If you're a scientist with noble intentions, worked like hell to get that PhD, went through the whole rigmarole. I could have gotten one, but I would have had a nervous breakdown. And so, and you get appraised of this, this is going on, and most of them do. Basically, you're compromised. You're in, right? You've just signed up. And so that's going on, and so now you are vulnerable to every other manner of corruption that the government wants to do. Now, this happened in the Soviet Union, it happened in Nazi Germany, but it's not supposed to happen here, but it is. And so in the climate area, you've got corruption, you've got violations of all kinds of principles, you've got a breakdown in the system. And so essentially, we have lost a significant percentage of scientific advances since 1947 because a blanket was put over the whole shebang and said, look, you can do your science, but it's underneath the blanket. And that's a tragedy. And just one of the costs of the truth embargo.
All reports look good from here in the blockhouse at this time. All aspects of the mission go, T-minus 30 seconds and counting. We'll get ignition of those 8 engines in the first stage at the 3-second mark in the countdown. Now T-minus 21 seconds and counting. We have completed our...
Same has to occur within this field to a certain degree, right? I mean, there might even be people who have already achieved some of this, and they have the knowledge, and they've gone before us, right? But can this be opened up and made available to more people?
Well, that's a wonderful analogy. ARPANET, they voluntarily let it out to the public. Now, there's a lot of politicians, old fogey politicians, that regret that now, because most of the politicians were of a age and a generation, they had no idea what the internet was, didn't know how to use an email, and that thing just got out the door. The government let it out the door, and now it has come back around to basically bite them in the ass, big time. The internet is the #1 threat to centralized, controlled, corrupt government. And, you know, it will help bring all this down. But the situation with ET technology, or whether it's ET derived or human derived, is unique, because essentially the situation is this: the government has created an embargo on the ET reality. Let's forget about the tech, just the ET reality. That cannot be acknowledged. Anything that threatens that embargo, theoretically up until today, must not be allowed. And so, yeah, like they let the internet out, they could let anti-gravity out. They just come to us one day, the president go in front of us and say, guess what? My the National Science Foundation has just informed me that we have gravitic craft. And we've been working on it, and they're going to become available. We're going to bring that technology out. Just think of the wonderful things. They're not going to do that, because the next day, they're going to get 5 million questions on the internet. Where did you get anti-gravitic technology? We want the complete provenance. We want to know the scientists that worked on it. They want their papers, their notes, how they figured it out. We want the whole history of it. And the government knows they can't give you that history, because the history has an ET connection, and therefore it'll be denied you.
Well, they're good about making up stories, right? So they could make something up.
But the American people are getting better at putting holes in their stories, right? It's getting harder to lie. This is a major problem for American politics. The internet is making it harder to lie. Not surprisingly, the government's response to this dilemma was to attend courses on how to lie better, right? We're going to outwit the internet. And so what you have is you have all of these things being held hostage to a fundamental issue. We are not prepared to announce the ET presence. It's not we're not prepared to announce a great technology breakthrough. No, we can't announce it because we're not prepared to announce the ET presence. And so when people like, certainly Richard Dolan, one of the most important people in this field, period, write what they write, what you start to learn is the cost of all this, right? The cost of all this. Let's respond to something that was just said. This economic transition, if we bring out zero-point energy, which may be partially derived from ET technology of some sort, well, a lot of jobs are going to be lost because we may be closing gas stations in 10 years or whatever. I will stand that completely on its head. If you could, in a reasonable length of time, say within 2 years after disclosure, start installing major energy generators working off of 0 point, producing electricity initially on a high level, factories, cities, and everything else, at 1 cent on the dollar, meaning your electrons are coming for 1 cent instead of $1, the impact on the economy would be astronomical. because you would have lowered the cost of business in a huge range of areas. Most importantly, you would lower the cost of development projects in business. Whereas you've got 1,000 business plans that won't work, drop the energy price by 95%, they all work. Suddenly, millions of people are being put back to work doing things they can now afford to do. Disclosure is not an impact, negative impact in the economy, it is the answer to our economic development. And so by withholding this technology under the truth embargo, they are putting millions of people out of work. They're creating economic crises that are taking your home, your pension, your job, and it's all in the interests of national security. And if the Harvard University or MIT wants to send out some of their fine professors to debate the impact of disclosure to the American people with me, I would be happy to do it. And maybe they can make the case, oh, no. Super cost, low technology, terrible thing. Oh, energy gets that cheap, oh, terrible things will happen. People will drive too much, they'll use up too much, whatever the hell. Let them do it, but they won't do it. And you have never seen it because they can't do it. They cannot win that argument. They can't even begin to win that argument, and so they say nothing. Nothing at all. And we raise these issues on the net, in conferences. I've raised it on CNN, Fox. We've got books out there. They have nothing to say about it because they cannot talk about it. Because if they do, it will hurt their career. You want to know how the America got from being the greatest nation on earth with the most powerful economy and everything else in 1950 to a nation that's on its way out the door with collapsing infrastructure, mass corruption, and $17 trillion in debt, and $200 million in unfunded liabilities? You look at those kinds of actions. You look at that history, and that's exactly the result you're going to get when you follow those policies.
All reports